You shared a little bit about like the solution or a way for people to help kind of overcome burnout. But are there other elements of like the productivity, like the post-COVID productivity dilemma that you're paying attention to or observing, or some of the trends that you're seeing there? Anything else that's sort of stood out to you the last year and a half that's changing or different?
Yeah, it's funny. We went back to the when San Francisco opened briefly. We went back to the office, and I was going probably 2 and 3 days a week. And it's funny. I not we have about 1,000 seats in San Francisco, and we're only getting a couple hundred people coming. But it's funny. I had a couple of sessions where I had a 5 minute meeting with my finance partner, and I hadn't talked to Molly in a while. And I had this question about how this one report was done, and we literally had this 5 minute meeting, and I like, oh, I got it, perfect, awesome. And I just forgot about the 5 minute meeting, right? Like those meetings don't exist anymore. Like, oh, I have to schedule it, and nobody ever schedules 5 minutes. And if it's too long for Slack, and too much of a pain in the ass for a half an hour meeting or getting 15 minutes on your calendar, then it's getting lost. And I'm a little bit worried about those type of moments, especially for onboarding. So we do a lot of interns, a lot of apprentices, a lot of college hires, and frankly, we know that onboarding has been more painful, less productive than than when we're in person. So we've invested heavily in onboarding tools and lots of documentation and lots of meetings. But it's still, even though we've invested a ton, it's still not as good as like picking over to your neighbor. Hey, what was that? What was that system called again? And how does that work? Like taking that 2 minutes to like help somebody get up to speed. And so I'm worried about long-term productivity of new hires in particular, and whether they come up to speed as fast. I think most other CTOs are also worried about sort of invention and innovation. How do you build the serendipity that an office environment has? And especially when we're not that big of a company, but we're 1,000 engineers, about 3,000 employees. It's hard to like connect people, and so we've been having sessions. We've been calling them coffee chats, and it's really sometimes it's with an executive, other times it's with like one of the inclusion groups, and frankly, people just want to sit in a room with people that aren't on their team and just talk about the company or what's going on, and like just like connect people that literally don't work together every day in the same company but don't work together, and they're just like fascinated. Oh, here's what's going on with sales, and oh my god, this is what's happening over on this part of the engineering team. It's just those kind of sessions you need to like now physically make happen, versus the past that would just happen in the lunchroom or while you're walking around the hallway, right? So I'm worried about it. I don't think there's a perfect answer for this, but we got to keep working on it.
Yeah, I can't help asking, how do you make those sessions happen, even manually?
So, frankly, who figured this out was our CEO. And so your CEO sends you a note saying, hey, would you like to do a 30-minute coffee chat with me and four other people? It's pretty hard. People don't turn that down, right? And so, and he came up with that insight initially saying, oh my God, I didn't get a lot of insight, but people just loved hearing from the other teams. They never get to interact with another team. And so we started that with a lot of executive groups. And then we have a bunch of internal resource groups for our different communities, and they've started it with themselves, saying, "Hey, if 10 of us are going to get together on Thursday, and sign up here and that sort of thing." So, again, it's mostly volunteer, so we have to figure out a little bit how to ingest this into the rest of the company as well. It's in a post. I mean, there are a lot of companies that are fully remote, and people love that environment. Personally, I don't love a fully remote environment. It's hard, even like when I'm speaking to a large group. I often will speak to 100 or maybe even 1,000 people, and you can feel the energy in the room. You can understand whether they're getting you. You can see if people have questions and that sort of thing. And that's pretty hard to do when 12 squares out of 1,000 are showing up on your screen, right? You can't really read the room. And so it's harder as a leader too. So there's lots of work that I need to do, and the rest of the world needs to figure out.
One of the other things that you had mentioned just briefly was about like some of the challenges around people interpreting flexibility differently. I was wondering if you could introduce that a little bit and like that, so how the challenge of that dynamic. Because I think when you brought that up, I was like, yeah, of course people have different interpretations of flexibility, but that makes it really, really complicated. Can you bring that up?
Oh man. Yeah, this is exactly the challenge I'm talking about. Is you may have one person who thinks flexibility is I'm not coming in before noon. Another person thinks I'm only working on Wednesdays and Fridays. Another person thinks that I'm working from Hawaii. Another person says I'm going to work from India. And so at the point you have a team that can never connect with each other, right? So companies. This is where I think companies are going to these norms, and sometimes they call it core hours and a few other things, and they're having to be pretty strict in some cases, saying, hey, we're going to work, this team is going to work from like 10 a.m. Pacific to 4 p.m. Pacific. You need to be online so that we can have some interaction, right? And maybe it's Monday through Wednesday, you do that. And then on Fridays and Thursdays, it's open. So I think that's what's going to happen. I think Amazon and a few other companies have decided to make it team by team. They get to decide. I think that's going to be short-lived as well, because it's going to be chaos when, like, hey, this team only works on Fridays and this team only works on Mondays. How are you going to get those teams connected? But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I think these norms are going to be really hard to figure out. I always make fun of folks wanting to work from Hawaii. You got a person who works in New York. You got a person who's in Hawaii. Now that you only have like a 2-hour window where you guys can talk to each other. And so if you're working from Hawaii, you're probably working on, West Coast time anyway. You get up late and, work later. But we'll see. We'll see. I think all of this is going to shake out in the next 6 months.
Yeah, Jerry and I definitely feel that tension. We're West Coast, East Coast split. But to me, even then, like East Coast, West Coast, like there still is a little bit of that sense of like you wake up on the West Coast and the East Coast has already been living for a couple hours. And so it makes it a little bit more challenging.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to spend some time in our European offices, and you end up doing double days because you do a whole day in Europe, and then California wakes up, and then you got to do a whole day with them, right? So you're very tired when you get back.
Jerry is familiar with that life.
Yeah, exactly.